Untold confession. I was 19 when I first experienced something that would haunt me forever. It wasn't just a story, it was a reality that I had to live through. A truth that remained buried inside me for years, eating me from within. It started with a letter, a simple yellowed piece of paper that arrived at our doorstep one winter morning. The handwriting was unfamiliar, jagged, almost as if the person had written it in a hurry, or in fear. My mother, curious yet hesitant, opened it while I sat across from her at the breakfast table. As she read, I noticed her hands trembling. Her face paled. She looked at me and whispered, "It's about your father." My father had died when I was 10. A heart attack, they said. But this letter claimed otherwise. "He was murdered," my mother finally choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "And the murderer still lives among us." A cold shiver ran down my spine. How could this be? How could the man I had grown up mourning have been taken from me in such a cruel way? And why was this truth hidden from us for so many years? The letter had no sender's name, no contact details, just a warning. "You're getting too close to the truth. Stop asking questions before it's too late." But I couldn't stop. I had to know. I started digging into my father's past, retracing his last days, speaking to people who had been close to him. My mother begged me to let it go, but I couldn't. If my father had been murdered, his killer was still out there, walking free. And I needed justice. Days turned into weeks, and the deeper I went, the darker the truth became. My father had debts, huge ones. He owed money to people who weren't exactly known for their patience or mercy. But was that enough to kill him? One name kept coming up, Uncle Ravi, my father's closest friend. A man I had trusted all my life. He had been there at every birthday, every milestone. He was family. But something about the way people hesitated when they spoke about him, the way their eyes darted around, made my stomach churn with suspicion. I decided to confront him. One evening, I found myself outside his house, heart pounding in my chest. As I knocked on his door, memories of my childhood with him flashed before me. His laughter, his warm hugs, his gentle reassurances after my father's death. But now, those memories felt tainted. He opened the door, surprised to see me. "What's wrong, Beta?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I took a deep breath. "Tell me the truth about my father." A flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. "What do you mean?" "I know he didn't just die. I know he was murdered, and I know you know something." There was a long silence. Then he sighed and stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke. He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking slightly. "I never wanted you to know," he said finally. "But if you've come this far, you deserve the truth." And then, he told me everything. My father had been involved in something much bigger than just unpaid debts. He had discovered something he wasn't supposed to, something that could have ruined powerful people. And those people? They made sure he never spoke about it. "I tried to save him," Uncle Ravi whispered, his eyes glistening with tears. "But I was too late." A lump formed in my throat. "Who did it?" He hesitated. "It doesn't matter. If you go after them, you'll end up just like him. Let it go." But how could I? How could I live knowing that my father's killers were still out there? I walked out of that house that night with a burden heavier than I had ever carried. I wanted revenge, but I also knew that revenge would come at a cost, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to pay it. To this day, I don't know who sent me that letter. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was a test. But one thing is certain, some truths are better left buried, because once you start digging, you may not like what you find.